of skepticism.
They're selling out the public trust. And, I think those guys who are doing the Koch brothers bidding and who are against all the evidence of the rational mind are saying that global warming doesn't exist, that they're contemptible human beings, and that, I wish that there were a law you could punish them under. I don't think there's a law that you can punish those politicians under, but I think the Koch brothers should be prosecuted for reckless endangering? Absolutely. That's a criminal offense, and they ought to be serving time for it.
So that's a flashback audio of RFK Jr., who he was talking about global warming and climate there. And in his remarks, which if you sign up to chapter and verse over at Substack, you got all of this morning. In his remarks, he was saying that global warming deniers were traitors and that companies like the Koch Industries and Exxon be, quote, put to corporate death. Seems a little different from how he sounded in his Twitter spaces yesterday. Welcome back to the program. Bottom of the second hour, Dana Loesch with you. RFK Jr. did this Twitter spaces yesterday with Elon Musk and David Sachs, and similar to what DeSantis did a couple of weeks ago. And I went back and listened to it. It's very long. But I went back. I was on radio finishing production stuff while, it was winding down. So I went back and listened, and I particularly wanted to listen to his stuff about gun control because I saw on Twitter that people were saying, oh my gosh, he's this big Second Amendment. He said he was a constitutional maximalist. And I thought, what? Because that sounded in that audio. I know the RFK Jr. who talks like that. That's the RFK Jr. that I have come to know. I know the RFK Jr. who denied the election results of 2004. I know the RFK Jr. who thought that climate denial was a crime. That's kind of the guy that I know. So I was shocked to hear see some of those headlines. Now I want to play this for you. There's two parts of this. This is part of his Twitter Spaces conversation. I think this is the one where he was talking about the Constitution and consensus. Let's listen.
We have one every 21 hours. The one thing that we have that's different than anybody in the world is the amount of psychiatric drugs our children are taking and our people are taking. And we need to look at that. And NIH should have done that years ago, but they will not do it. And they'll block other people from doing it because they're working not for us, but for the pharmaceutical industry, and this is their major profit center today. And so nobody wants to hear none of those, pharma does not want to hear about any problems with SSRIs, but I will do those studies immediately when I get into office, and we're going to get the truth. It's something, guns, the proliferation of guns, clearly abet violence, but anybody who tells you they can remove enough guns, AR-15s or whatever, by tinkering at the margins and get to the kind of the situation that they have in Western Europe is pulling your leg. It's not going to happen. We need to look now at other solutions, and the only way we're ultimately going to get gun controls in this country is through consensus, and that consensus cannot happen when we're all at each other's throats.
So he's mentioning, the SSRIs and the relationship between psychiatric drugs and violence, how that should be studied. I think that's good. But then he says, and I think this might be in the other soundbite, he said he's not going to take away anybody's guns. He says, I'm a constitutional maximalist, and the issue's been settled by the Supreme Court. But then you heard the very end of that, what he just said. He said, the only way we're going to get gun controls in this country is through consensus, and that consensus cannot happen when we're all at each other's throats. Okay, so that's bad. His remark about the SSRIs and the relationship between that and violence, that's good. His remark about consensus and the Constitution is bad. And that's because consensus doesn't determine the extent to which we are allowed to exercise our natural rights. It's weird for him to say, and he said this in the same discussion, that he's a constitutional maximalist, but only up to the point of consensus. These are two irreconcilable statements. One cancels out the other. So he is not articulate here. I do not feel confident in his answer. I do not feel at ease over his answer. It sounds like he is trying to dress up a position of gun control by saying that he supports the Constitution. But then when you add consensus, Well, the framers were incredibly clear, particularly in the Federalist Papers. Your natural rights are not subject to consensus. The end. That's all there is to it. And there are a lot of people, including some Republicans out there, that I just was shocked to see running like sort of like promos for him. Now, sometimes there's friendly fire, and I had some words. I always get along with, I always disagree with even like-minded people, unless it's very dumb, in which case, I believe that sheep, protect sheep, but the wolves get the full force. And I don't like to see wolf-like behavior like that, and people, pushing goofy stuff. So, that explains some things. But this guy's not a savior. I mean, he seems less crazy than other Democrats because I think he understands what turns voters off, right? The issue, though, is consensus. He's also had some, I put up some of the scrub tweets that he had. I mean, if you go to the links, and I had the links where these tweets were, they've been deleted. He called gun owners terrorists. He called gun owner organizations terror groups who turned the Second Amendment into a suicide pact for our children. That's what he tweeted on February 15th, 2018. He still has some of them up. The February 17th one, 2018, right after Parkland, that's still up. So you've got to be able to answer to that. I mean, that's the thing. One of my favorite quotes from Reagan was his quip that my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy. I mean, measuring political friendship or the strength of an ally, you have to have some sort of measure. And it should include more than just one issue. He's good on the virus vax stuff and big pharma. But on this was no clarification. I mean, and then when he starts getting out of the realm of virus vax and big pharma, he starts to sound like Democrats. I mean, when he's talking about when he's saying global warming deniers are traitors and that, they and coal companies should, quote, be in jail for all of eternity. He literally wrote an article titled Jailing Climate Deniers that is on way back, but it's been memory hold on the internet. Now, some people are like, oh, well, Dana, he's changed. He should be given grace. Some of this was not even 10 years ago, by the way. Now, I sincerely hope that he's changing or is on a pathway to change, and that's all well and good. Were he not running for the highest office in the land? And there's the difference. I am always pro people changing their minds to like-minded positions, but without clarification or acknowledgement of their previous position and explanation as to why they changed, it's meaningless. Nobody gets a pass from explaining to the voting public whether or not they changed their views. Nobody gets a pass. This is politics. We are owed this. You owe us explanations. And instead of downplaying people's concerns or viciously berating people who raise them on social media, his supporters maybe should kind of encourage him to speak concisely and clearly to clear up any confusion. Not every single person that has a question also has ill intent, okay? And it's irrational to assume that everybody who asks a question does so motivated by ill intent. I'm so damn tired of this. I bit somebody's head off yesterday because they assumed the same thing of me. Wait a minute, I want to know if I should be praising this guy or being sus. I want to know. And there, like I said, there's this fabled candidate that some people have convinced themselves exists. Somebody who's going to convince enough people on both sides to vote for them. That candidate does not exist. That candidate never will exist. Stop. The left has moved so far left, they can't even identify women anymore. The right is just a combination of, dear heaven, can we buy products that aren't covered in rainbows? And then the new NatCons who think that history began the day that they were born. And then you have the middle, which is this vast wasteland of these poor, cynical, shell-shocked voters who are far more likely to vote for whomever promises first to never run another political ad. Now, like I said, RFK Jr. makes some very good points on Big Pharma and the virus vax, but that does not make him a political ally. It definitely doesn't satisfy concerns about the other things that he has said. I mean, yes, he looks more attractive to independents and right-leaning voters because he just doesn't look nuts. But I want to make this point too, merely withdrawing to an earlier version of progressivism doesn't solve the problem. You're just buying time. So merely receding to an earlier stage of Democrat, one that was less crazy and isn't the crazy one now, that doesn't change anything. You're buying yourself time. That's it. I mean, he's still a Democrat. He sounds like them when he talks about any other issue. I wrote on Substack this morning, if hell froze over and he were the Democrat nominee, and then if hell thawed and froze over again and he won the presidency, he would still be a Democrat representing Democrats, strategizing with Democrats, doing the bidding of Democrats. You do not change the soul of a party simply by replacing the head of it. As we learned from 2016 to 2020. This is Politics 101. And you will not walk back decades of hardcore, now communism, with one guy and one election. This is a generational fight. I've said this for over 10 years. It is a generational battle. This is not a one election and done thing. And instead of expending all this energy, some people who do this, instead of expending all of this energy thinking that, oh, this election will solve it. No, you need to dig in and work harder and teach your damn kids to resist and defeat cultural Marxism. That's what you should be doing. You should be preparing for this and treating it like a generational cultural battle instead of a one and done election victory. And if you don't, you'll lose. And you won't just lose for you. You're going to lose for your kids and you're going to lose for your grandkids. A politician is never going to fight as hard for your family as you will yourself. Stop outsourcing it.